Welcome, Jay Duplass, writer and star and executive producer of this lovely movie. We're so happy to have you back in Austin.
I love being here.
Welcome. So you've worked with Lynn Shelton, the director, for quite some time, and there's a thread in her film about people who hit a stage where they're no longer developing, or they have some sort of not quite arrested development, but something keeps them from self-actualizing. But in this, it's really different because it's sort of the world that kept your character from growing. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, her interests and your interest coming into this story and writing together.
Well, Lynn had... I had actually never personally worked with her that much. It was my brother that had made earlier movies with her. And I was just friendly with her as a person. And then when she saw Transparent, she just kept texting me and emailing me. She was really into me as an actor, and it was very thrilling because I wasn't really an actor before that. And even when I was on the show, it took me a few years before I really acknowledged that okay, I like this. I think I might be okay at it, and other people really like it. So it started with that, and then she kept telling me, I'm gonna put you in something, and I was like, oh, okay. And then eventually she said, okay, it was as simple as this. She said, I see you coming out of prison and relentlessly romantically pursuing your high school teacher who helped you, get out. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. That's really where it started. And, we talked a bit about, I think everyone has wondered about the older woman on the outside and the younger guy on the inside of prison. That's a thing, right? And we see that a lot, and no one had explored it. And we did research and kind of read a lot of articles together, and then she wrote the first draft of the script, and it was much more of a outline-y draft of the typical nature of maybe her earlier work and some of Mark's and my earlier work, a rough-hewn thing. And I guess it was about that time that I was really starting to talk to people who had been in prison for 10 or 20 years, people who had been over-sentenced, and learning about that, learning about the culture of trying to assimilate back into society. And it just started to hit me that it was very important that we get this right and that we honor this and do this to the best of our abilities. So, Lynn is one of the most prolific TV directors. And, she went away and did a TV episode, and I was like, hey, do you mind if I just go nuts on this draft, and you don't have to use it if you don't want, but I want to keep the ball rolling, keep pushing it. And, we ended up writing it very intensely back and forth together. And I was a little bit obsessive about it and think I drove her crazy, actually, because we even continued to rewrite while we were shooting. Just that for the reason of just trying to make it more in the moment and more electric. But the bigger picture really being to try and get it right and to honor what so many people actually go through.
And what were the most important parts of what you learned in those interviews and in that research that were essential for you to unlocking this character?
I just got chills. I guess the main thing that unlocked it for me, because I was nervous when she said you're a guy coming out of prison, because I think our immediate mind goes to this place where guys come out and they're really angry and they're taking it out on everybody. And I was like, I'm a softie, I don't know if I have that in me. That was subconscious worry at the beginning. But the more that I researched, and I did befriend one person in particular who I just ended up going really deep with, is is like a middle-class kid who was involved in a PETA action that was classified. They wanted to make an example of him. They classified him as a terrorist, and he went to prison for 15 years. And it was the type of offense where his lawyers were like, don't worry, it'll be 6 months at most in a really soft place. And it just kept going deeper and deeper, and he went to prison for 15 years. And I guess what I learned from him and pretty much all the guys that I was talking to is they had a very different feel from the stereotype of what I thought. They were insanely vulnerable to the normal world. They were terrified of not being accepted. They had the feeling that they would be picked up at any moment and put back in prison. They were terrified that they would never be loved. Many of them did what Chris does in this movie, where they essentially, even if they have a one-bedroom apartment, they would just like not use the bedroom and just use the living room, because they were like essentially recreating a cell, or not to over dramatize it, I think maybe just simplifying their whole living situation. But when I tapped into that, like this just vulnerability and like this, I noticed from them, like especially just me talking to them, they were so thrilled and appreciative for someone to like hear them and listen to them. And there was like so much love and so much talking that would come out, and I was like, okay, this feels new and real, and also like something that I think I can do well.
It wasn't like a stoic.
No, it wasn't like a stoic
Yeah.
dude who was like punching shit every 10 seconds, I'm sure that exists too, but that's not what I experienced.
I want to open it up to everybody here, but I want to ask you one more question, and that's about working with somebody as incredible as Edie Falco. And she's just really a master performer, and the two of you have this incredible energy together. What did she bring out in you, or did you learn anything working with her that you hadn't, or something you hadn't experienced before working across other actors?
I'm kind of got lucky that I was writing this thing and producing this thing, because I didn't have time to freak out about the fact that I was like staring at Edie Falco's face the entire time, about to do a sex scene with Edie Falco. I mean, it's just, she's a legend, and but all I can really say is that she's the most normal person in the world, very, very open, very vulnerable, very chill. We were working out of a VFW in rural northern Washington. It was a rough, cold, wet place to be. We were just out in the rain. By the way, when you shoot in Washington State and it rains, they just shoot in it. They're just like, okay, just go out and stand there. We'll shoot you. And she was game for it all. And, I mean, she's just top-lined huge TV shows. It's hard to describe. She's everything that you think she is, and super, super down-to-earth. And I just feel like so grateful and lucky that I got to even be in a movie with her, much less star in a movie with her.
You both were lucky. Questions for Jay? Yes, right here.
Hey, I appreciate the amount of research you did in this picture, but your ability to create and write characters for the screen in your body of work is truly impressive. And I just wonder, are you just a great observer of human behavior? Is it the research, or is it all coming from up here when you create these realistic characters that are so believable and not caricatures?
That was a nice loud voice. I'm not going to repeat it.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I am obsessed with people, and I'm gonna be thinking about you on the car ride home. That's this is how it works. Yeah, I mean, my brother and I just wrote a book, and we have these airport chapters, and it's about him and me sitting in airports and watching people and making up stories about them and wondering what it's like, and just loving them and appreciating all the fucked up and funny and amazing and sweet stuff about them. So But yeah, this is by far the most different person. I've mostly played people pretty, in my socioeconomic realm, my peers. This is the first time I really had to go very far outside of myself and my realm to do it, and I was scared. But it's nice to hear you say that because it makes me feel good.
Over here, sir.
I was going to say, I really enjoyed the ending. I thought it made so much sense. I guess it could have gone in many different ways, but to me that just rung home. I thought, boy, that's really life.
God, thanks. We shot mostly sequentially, and we were kind of like rewriting and tooling things back and forth as we went. And I remember when we were the night before this last scene, we just came up with this idea of getting to know each other as we are now. It's so weird because if you were to write that in a screenplay and hand it to a studio, they would just be like, that's fucking it? That's your climax? Is get to know each other as we are now? Bro. You know what I mean? But like we had been through the whole movie, and it was, when you go through it and you live it, that was just the reality of what it was. It's just like this fucking frenzy of 3 weeks or whatever since he got out. In retrospect, we were like, that was insane. It made sense because they were both had been worked up for freaking 20 years. We've all been there, and it's just like, wow, that's what we wanted for them for the future, is to like calm the fuck down and have a cheeseburger and see what it actually is. And we had that talk though, just like, can we do this? Is this very sort of, pedestrian realist ending, I guess, basically precedented by her wisdom and her feeling him out for the fact that like she could trust that he was also gonna like let go. Anyways, I'm over talking it, but yeah, it was a weird way to end it, and I'm glad to hear that you liked it, and we've also gotten good feedback about it.
There's one right over here.
The last scene where you cried was just it was so emotional, it was so powerful, I actually teared up. And I'm just wondering, how did you get yourself there?
How did you get yourself there in the last scene, which was very moving for this audience member?
I was just trying not to cry too much. My whole life is basically trying not to cry. I mean, to be totally honest, I am the person in my family where everybody's like, can you fucking stop having all these feelings because you're making us uncomfortable? And now I get paid for that shit. It's pretty great. But it is weird and unusual because, when I was in high school, I would look at theater kids at lunch, like breaking into song, and I would be like, I will never be you. I will never be you. And then around 40, when Jill Soloway put me in her show Transparent, I had a very weird reverse midlife crisis where I basically, I think, figured out what I at least enjoy the most and what comes most naturally to me. I just think it's unusual. I'm a pretty introverted and shy person. I mean, I can be charismatic and master of ceremonies at times, but like my nature is inward, and I think I subconsciously just thought that just like that that's not a job for people like me, but I think now that I look at it, it's like, oh yeah, like I think a lot of our good actors are actually pretty quietly very emotional people. It's just harder, I think, to get there when you don't want attention. It's a weird combo where yeah, wanting attention seems to go parallel with wanting to be an actor, but it's not always the case.
We have time for a couple more. Yes, right here in the center.
I absolutely loved the movie. I loved Lynn Shelton, and I loved kind of being just reintroduced to you as this character. It was just really
Great question.
share that. And you had mentioned talking about directing and rewriting on set, or maybe rewriting on set. Was that something that you would do a couple days before, the night before, or on the spot? And was it something that if it was on the spot, was it like you could feel something wasn't quite gelling and then you wanted to change it?
All of the above.
Rewriting on set.
But can you speak to one example of one day?
Every day. I think I just, my brother and I failed so much, and we come from a very different school. It is a very unpatriarchal, unauteurish school of filmmaking, which is like we have certain feelings and emotions that we want to achieve, and we're here on set, and we're trying to create a situation where lightning can strike. So because of that whole philosophy, because, you know, we tried to be the Coen brothers and we didn't have that intellectual exacting ability. We're just not as smart or as visionary as them. But it turned out that we're kind of the opposite. And Lynn is very much the same way. It's just like, okay, here we are. And part of that involves like never rehearsing and never even discussing things before a first take, because who knows what will happen, and that level of unknown. So I think just knowing that mindset, you can see where like literally like we're always just kind of like shifting and moving things around and nudging things to try to find what is special and important about this moment, and what is the most subtle and realistically human way for it to unfold. And God, I wish I had an example for you. I mean, just the ending scene, there was another ending that we were flirting with, that they would be like walking on the street months later, and that we would walk past each other and it would crush me, and then she turned around and tapped me on the shoulder and we would cut to black, which was like a very cinematic. We were like psyched about how that would be like this little sparkle, right? But the more that we sat with it, we moved towards like, no, actually where we're going is not sparkle. Where we're going is hardcore adult human relationship. And that's why we ended up with like two people standing in a haystack talking to each other in a calm way, which again, the studio would just be like, boring.
Okay, I'm afraid we only have time for one more. I know there's a bunch of hands, so I'm gonna take the first one I saw.
The plot point where you get caught at the hotel, was that hard to arrive to? Did you play with a lot of other scenarios, you know, to move the plot forward in that direction?
The question is about the moment where they get caught and sort of caught in the act at the hotel. Can you talk about coming up with that moment, and if there were other ideas or approaches to that?
Yeah, we thought about that hotel moment a lot. We wrote it many different ways. It had gotten very dramatic at times. It had gotten just subtle at times. When it came time to shoot it, we had about 2 hours, and we were just like, just do it. You guys just do it, and then we'll shoot it. It's one of those things where it's just like constantly changing from concept to script to shooting to editorial. We changed it a bit in editorial as well. So I don't know. I think the more that I think about movies in terms of a communication with an audience, I think people forget that. I think filmmakers forget that. You know, you're very focused on yourself and your inward thoughts and all these. You're trying to make something, but what you're really doing is you're having a communication with an audience of strangers that's 2 to 3 years away, and it's a very weird thing. And so the more that you can bring people into it, bring the audience into it. And it might be with readers, and it might be with just like Edie Falco, and who's just like a really thoughtful person. It's just like, hey, we're thinking about these things. What feels right to you? But the constant communication, the constant communism of, you know what I mean? Not being a dictator, not being an auteur, actually be, having vision, but being porous and vulnerable, and being in the place of I don't know is I find to be, the more that I go in this business and the more that I explore studio filmmaking, I find that that is a massive revolution in filmmaking, is to come from the place of I don't know. And I'm more interested in the movies that have I don't know in them.